When we talk about Shakespeare, it can all feel a little old. But today, we're not just looking at a 400-year-old play. We're going to break down a timeless psychological thriller. It's this terrifyingly precise recipe for how a good person can be driven to do truly terrible things. Okay, let's dive into Othello.
So, right off the bat, you have to get your head around this central puzzle of this story. On one side, you've got Othello the hero. This guy is a celebrated, powerful, and noble general. I mean, a true man of honor. But by the end of the play, he becomes, well, this a man just consumed by rage, a murderer who kills the person he loves most. It is an absolutely complete and devastating transformation.
So the big question is, how on earth does that happen? Right? How does a hero fall so far, so fast? What's the formula that can actually turn love into hate and nobility into absolute tragedy? Well, that is the mystery we're going to solve today by breaking down the three key ingredients.
Every tragic recipe has a foundational element, the ingredient that the entire collapse is built on. For Othello, that's our first ingredient, his own identity as the outsider. The key to understanding Othello, it all starts with how he's seen by everyone else. Yeah, he's a powerful general leading the entire Venetian army. He has status, for sure. But he's always referred to as the Moor of Venice. And that title, it constantly marks him as different. So despite all his power, he's an outsider because of his race. And that creates this deep, simmering insecurity.
And this, right here, is what makes him so vulnerable. Look, Othello could command armies. He could face down any enemy on the battlefield with total confidence. But his real weakness? It wasn't external. It was all internal. It was this crack in his own self-perception, a fear that maybe he didn't truly belong. And that crack was just sitting there, waiting for someone to exploit it.
Okay, so let's move to our second ingredient and see how that vulnerability gets weaponized. This is where we bring in the story's brilliant, terrifying villain, Iago, and his masterful architecture of manipulation.
Iago basically tells us his whole game plan himself in this chillingly simple confession: I am not what I am. To everyone around him, and especially to Othello, he's honest Iago, the loyal, trustworthy friend. But in reality, he is a master of deception, secretly pulling the strings to completely destroy the man who trusts him the most.
So how does he do it? Well, his plan is just methodical and devastatingly effective. First, he zeroes in on Othello's biggest insecurity, that feeling of being an outsider. Then he starts planting these tiny, poisonous seeds of doubt about his wife Desdemona's faithfulness. He follows that up by creating fake proof, most famously a lost handkerchief. And then, finally, he systematically cuts Othello off from anyone who could possibly tell him the truth. It's like a clinical masterclass in psychological warfare.
All of Iago's manipulation, all of that scheming, it's all designed to unleash the third, final, and most destructive ingredient in our tragic recipe, the all-consuming poison of jealousy. Shakespeare gives us one of the most famous lines in all of literature to describe this feeling. Iago actually pretends to warn Othello, saying jealousy is the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on. Think about that. He's not just describing an emotion, he's describing a parasite, a self-devouring force that eats its host from the inside out, turning everything good, even love, into poison. And that poison works with breathtaking speed. I mean, Othello starts the play as this figure of noble confidence, completely secure in his love. But Iago's whispers turn that confidence into a gnawing doubt. That doubt quickly festers into a consuming rage, until finally, he arrives at this tragic and completely false certainty. His psychological collapse is just astonishingly fast. So when you mix these three ingredients together, the outsider insecurity, the masterful manipulation, and that poison of jealousy, you get the play's absolutely heartbreaking end. Let's look at that conclusion and figure out why, after 400 years, this story still feels so immediate and so powerful. Ultimately, the tragedy isn't caused by just one thing going wrong. It's a perfect storm. Othello's own insecurity, born from a society's prejudice, that was the fertile ground. Iago's masterful manipulation, that was the seed. And the jealousy that grew from it, that was the toxic weed that choked everything beautiful, leading to a completely irreversible tragedy. And this is why it matters so much today. Seriously, 400 years later, these warnings are as loud as ever.
We see the corrosive impact of prejudice all around us. We see the devastating power of misinformation that's designed to divide us. We know the danger of unchecked emotion, and we understand, maybe now more than ever, just how fragile trust really is.
Which leaves us with one final, kind of haunting question. Othello's tragedy was set in motion by one man whispering poison into his ear. Today, in an age of fake news, social media algorithms, and anonymous online manipulation, who or what is our Iago?